Nice job getting that first story done. If you've never written a journalistic story before, it's very difficult. It's not like an essay type story or some of the other writing you've had to do in high school and college. This is a different style doing this, what we're learning here. So it's difficult to adjust to, but the first one is the hardest one. Now you've gotten that out of the way. Take a look at my feedback, take a look at my comments, make sure you really understand it. All those comments I give you, it's so that you can hopefully learn from what you've done and then apply it and improve on the next one. So I gave you very specific feedback, each one of you individually, just some broad observations. I noticed the leads, which is common, for especially if this is the first time we've done it. Leads we struggled with a little bit. Remember, the leads are very broad to begin with, and then they get more specific. So if you're mentioning a person, unless it's a celebrity or a person of prominence, and when we say person of prominence, it's like a governor, a I don't know, famous author, someone that's really famous. That if you said their name, most people would know. If it's not someone like that, you're not using their name in that first sentence, right? And I noticed that came up a few times, that people were mentioning names in that first sentence, and you're not doing that in a hard news story. You're giving a modifier. So instead of saying, for example, if you were talking about me, Professor Adam Chiara, you're not going to say Adam Chiara X, Y, and Z. You would say a professor at University of Hartford, right? You would describe it. Or if you're talking about, if I was writing about you, I'm not going to say your name in the lead sentence. I'm going to say a student of University of Hartford, or depending on where you live. Let's say you live in New Britain. A New Britain woman, was recently in a car accident. So that's how you're using a modifier. You're not giving that specific name. So I noticed we struggle with that. I also noticed struggle a little bit sometimes putting things into context. And what I mean by that is you have to remember, the story well. You're the one that went out and reported it. You might have some background information on it. A lot of times the reader knows nothing about it. So when you introduce something, when you start to talk about something, make sure you give a sentence or two explaining what it is, right? So I'll give an example here. Let's say you say there is I know no one covered stories like this, but I'm just trying to think of traditional hard news stories. Let's say you're talking about a fire that happened, and you're talking about if the fire happened at a factory, right? You have to give a few sentences maybe explaining that factory. So what kind of factory is it? Were there other houses around? Is it on a busy street? Is it were there people inside the factory when it happened? Those kind of details. So if you just say a fire broke out in a factory, that's fine to start with. But at some point, you're going to have to now talk a little bit about this factory, like what's produced in this factory. You don't have to give a full 3-paragraph explanation and give the full history of this factory, but you should be able to describe a little bit more about this factory and get it a little bit more specific for the reader. That's just one example, but I bet if you go back to your writing and you look at some of the places that I even said, explain this a little bit more, you'll see what I mean. If you start to maybe talk about, an event or something, but then you don't really explain like what that event is for, or why it's important, or who's attending that event. Things are going to help us understand the story a little bit better. All right, so those were just some brief observations, general observations for your hard news stories. Again, I gave you more specifics, but I want you to message me if you're not sure about something, because I promise you, if you really look at that feedback and you make sure you understand it and you start using it on your future stories, it's only going to get easier for you and your grades are only going to get better. All right, let's take a look at this week now. So you're going to be reading, this week's is heavy reading. You've got 3 chapters, 14, 15, and 16. They're a little bit shorter of chapters, but you are going to have to do 3, so make sure you allow yourself enough time to get those done. You're going to take a quiz that are based on these chapters, as always. And we have an exercise to complete, which I'll click on in a second. You're also going to be finishing up your profile story, which is due at the end of this week, as you already know. And we're going to begin your final story. Now, your final story is not going to be due for a few more weeks. It's due the absolute last day, pretty much, of when this class is. But I want to give it to you early so you can start to work on it early and really pace yourself. I'm going to have a separate video talking about your final story. So take a look. I'm not going to explain it in this video. You can take a look at the next one, but then that story is going to be talking about that video is going to be talking about your final story. And then again, continue to read a few new stories each day. So you just kind of see the lessons that we learn here in class, see how they're actually used in the real world. All right, so let's take a look first at your assignment. I'm going to go actually to the homework folder. You've got your quiz here. Here's going to be your assignment. It's going to be question number 1 on page 285. So you don't have to answer all the questions. You're only answering number 1 on page 285. You're going to have to, this isn't going to make any sense to you if you haven't read the chapters yet, but you're going to have to find, you're going to answer that question. And then in addition to the book, and this is where I don't want you to get tripped up, so in addition to answering number 1 on page 285, you're also going to have to find another case where actual malice went to court. This will make more sense when you've read the chapter, but basically you now have to do a little research online, or, it's not going to be in your textbook, but you can most likely find it online. You could go to a library, but I'm guessing most of you are going to want to do a search online for this. Look for what cases about actual malice, and then I want you to answer these questions here. This is important. You're not going to be copying and pasting answers. So I don't want to see copy and paste when you find the answer. Even if it's the correct answer, just don't copy and paste it from somewhere and put it here. Put it in your own words. Explain it to me in what we call layman terms, right? Explain it to me in plain English. Just like explain to me like you would a friend. So I want you to answer all these questions based on the research that you've done. So that's what your assignment is. You got one question to answer in the book, and then you've got these to answer on your own with your own research. And then, like I said, you have your quiz. You'll be turning in your profile story, which you should have already started working on, but you're going to be submitting your profile story this week. And then your final assignment, which I'll go over in another video that you can take a look at. So this is a heavy week. I mean, we're getting near the end now, just so you kind of have an idea what's left here in this class. The profile story, which you're going to be submitting this week, and that'll be off your plate. Then you've only got one more writing assignment, which is your final assignment, and you have a few weeks to do it. So you only got one more big assignment. You've got a few more chapters and a couple more exercises. But what ends up happening is that last week, you back off the reading, and it's you working on your final assignment. So really, I think, in my opinion, it's this week and next week, which is the core of this class. This is now where you're starting to put everything together. You've already got a lot of the theory now down, so now it's doing a lot of practice and applying it, and it's probably going to take you more time than the other weeks. So these next 2 weeks are going to be heavy, but then the last week, hopefully if you've done it right and you've started working on your final assignment and giving yourself time, that last week is more just editing, putting the fine touches, and then we're done. So, I mean, we're pretty close, but these 2 weeks are pretty intense. As always, please message me if you aren't sure about the feedback I give you or you have any questions about the class, feel lost, confused. This semester I haven't gotten too many messages, which is unusual because I usually get a lot more on these online classes. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It seems like everybody is handling the class all right, but I just want to let you know, again, if there's any confusion at all, come to me early. I'd rather you come to me early than late. Watch the next video that talks about your final assignment, and I'll see you next week.